Yeah, well, welcome to our workshop tonight, Trees for a Hotter, Drier Future. And my name is Dick Cornet. I'm a volunteer on ANCA. And I've been a Redlands resident for over 40 years. We want to thank you for attending this workshop. This is the third of our workshops called in the Resilient Living series. We have a number of handouts over here, and I want to let you know that we have several raffle prizes, and with the group here tonight, you have an excellent chance of winning something, including three $50 gift certificates to Sunrise Growers for hopefully buy a tree and plant a tree. But so that's also, and then the university students over here have some trees also that they will be giving away. So hopefully you all have a raffle ticket also, so that you can partake in that. I'm going to just talk on a couple slides to really kind of set the stage for our workshop tonight. I want to briefly discuss the benefits of trees relating to addressing climate warming, but I also want to talk about the vulnerability of trees because of climate warming. So what are the benefits of trees? There's two major benefits of trees, direct benefits of trees here, and certainly the biggest one probably is, it removes CO2. It's one of the biggest natural mechanisms for removing CO2 that we have. In fact, it removes up to 25 to 30%, trees do, of the CO2 in our atmosphere. The other one that's large is the oceans. The oceans absorb about 15 to 20%. But all the rest of that carbon dioxide just keeps building up in the atmosphere. Now, the other thing I think is a huge benefit of trees is, of course, their cooling effect. Their effect on buildings, strategically planted trees next to buildings, and of course on cooling down walkways and people who work outside and trees do that. And why is that important? Well, that's important because the last bullet on this slide here is that heat is the deadliest of the global warming weather impacts. There are over 12,000 people a year that die directly from heat exhaustion or have other effects because of heat. We've had heat waves, more heat waves in the near term, and those are caused definitely by global warming. So we're having these heat waves, and people are dying from that, both inside houses with not having adequate air conditioning or insulation, but trees can help alleviate that issue. And Janet's going to talk a little bit more about that in her presentation. Many other benefits, though, of trees. Obviously, trees provide a vital habitat for birds and other critters. Trees are a source of food. Probably most of you, or many of you, have fruit trees in the back of your yard. I know I do. Peach, lemon, orange, all of that. They're aesthetically pleasing and add value to our properties. They absorb pollutants from the air, so they help clean up our air. And they help prevent soil erosion and reduce runoff. And they promote mental well-being. However, trees are vulnerable to threats because of global warming. And the obvious ones are here. Drought, severe drought. We're in a mega drought here in California now. With limited water supplies, people in urban areas may not be watering their lawns or their plants as much as they should be. And we really need to dedicate the amount of water we have for irrigation outside as a first priority to keeping trees healthy, because they're the longest, they live long, and if we lose a tree, it takes a long time to replace it. Secondly, when trees are compromised by heat or starting to die, insects, infestation, diseases take control. take over. Bark beetle is a big example of that we've had here in the mountains. And in fact, and then the last one I should say is catastrophic forest fire. So all of these act together. And in fact, I just read an article that said that about 30% of California's forests in the Sierra Nevadas have been lost over the last 10 years because of these factors. And the last one is, even we as man on a worldwide basis, we're taking out trees, especially in the Amazon and in Indonesia. Some data I've seen says that there's the equivalent of 48 football fields each minute are taken out in deforestation on these areas. So there's a huge amount of trees that are being removed worldwide, and from these activities, fortunately there are groups that are planting trees too. But the net effect is we're losing trees. In fact, I've heard data about we're losing about 10 billion trees a year worldwide. So trees are very important to us, and tonight we're going to talk about trees and trees for tomorrow, and how we can select trees that benefit us the most. Our first speaker is Janet Harden. Janet is an environmental horticulturist and master gardener with the University of California Cooperative. Over her 38 years with UC, she has led applied research projects to determine irrigation requirements of landscape trees and measured their ecosystem and societal benefits in urban areas. She is a published educator with a focus on drought, heat, and pest-tolerant plants, tree species for the Inland Empire. She provides academic oversight to the UC Riverside Continuing Education in the San Bernardino County Master Gardener programs. Our second speaker is Eric Reeves. Eric is with the City of Redlands. He's superintendent in the Facilities and Community Services Department and oversees 7 divisions in the department, including the Street Tree Division. He started his career as a tree trimmer and worked his way up through the ranks of the city. So he has hands-on experience with trees. He is also a certified arborist and has a tract certification. So we're going to have the speakers do their talks, and then we'll open it up for questions after that. So Janet, would you like to start?
Thank you so much. Do you have the clicker? I'm going to need that. You stole the clicker. Good evening, everybody. Let me make sure this is working. Yes, it is. Excellent. Thank you so much, Dick. Thank you, ANCA. Thank you, Linda, all the volunteers that are here, including ANCA, and also our University of California Cooperative Extension Master Gardeners. There's several of them here as well. Thank you to Mandy Parks, the district manager at Inland Empire Resource Conservation District, and mostly to all of you for coming out this chilly evening. Thank goodness it's the day after a drenching rain, and talking about drought, because unfortunately it's still here. As Dick said, I am an academic. I'm with University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. My assignment is to provide applied research and extend it through various nonprofit organizations and community development groups and people like yourselves to those that can put it to good use. Most of my domain is Southern California. It's in Riverside, Los Angeles, and San Bernardino County. And I'm very familiar with Redlands. When I got this job in 1984, no, I'm not 21 anymore, I have wisdom along with a few signs of age. But with that, the first home that my husband and I ever bought was right here in Redlands. Redlands has a very warm space in my heart. Over the next half hour or so, I'm going to talk about what the direness is, what predicament that we all know that we're in, but some solutions. So the talk will start with what's going to seem like bad news, and then it's going to crescendo into, yes, We can do things, here's what we can do together, and no, it's not too late. We know that California is in the midst of a long, probably even longer than we're imagining. It seems like drought is more of the regular season now, rather than having 10 years without a drought and then a 2 to 3 year drought. That, and there's no fire season anymore, so we need to get used to it, and we need to act, and we need to deal with change that's going to not only increase the coolness of our cities, but also for our children and our children's children, make their world more habitable. We have a tree drought. This is a street in Redlands, very near here. Nary a tree. There's 3 reasons for that. One, people like Eric Reeves, who is a certified arborist and the next speaker, get hired by cities because of their expertise. And then when times aren't so good, sometimes those are the first positions to be dropped by a municipality. So what's happened in some of these cities are that you have the right species in the right location with the right care, and suddenly the certified arborist is gone. Then we have invasive species. We have something called the invasive shothole borer that can wipe out even pretty healthy trees. So that's one reason. The second reason is due to urban heat islands. Even some of our hardy native trees just aren't thriving, and that's putting it mildly. It's not the year 1752 anymore, so when we go into some of these databases I'm going to share, and we're looking at only native plants, we're going to be disappointed. So what, if you will, my message is, let's always start with natives, but the good news is that there's also non-invasive, non-natives that help to develop and enlarge our ecosystem. So I'll be sharing some of those databases with you. The third reason that we're void of trees in so many neighborhoods is because we have side and backyards that are the responsibility of the renters or the homeowners. Not everybody knows where to go. They don't know whether their local nursery has these recommended trees. So part of my job is to connect the species that through research we know are hardy and we know can withstand the challenges of climate change with the local residents, with city planners, with those that can get these literally in the ground, and they can start to provide their ecosystem and societal benefits soon. As far as the U.S. Drought Monitor, this gets updated every Thursday. So tomorrow, it's not going to change even though we had a few drops of rain. This is the most recent data from last Thursday. Not a surprise to you that about 100% of the state is in moderate, severe, or extreme exceptional drought. There's always 1 or 2 researchers, every time I teach this, or continuing education spreads the word about what we and UC have done as far as drought-resistant landscape research. So here's 2 research papers. This PowerPoint is available, and I'll send a link to everybody whose email we have here. Feel free to use the PowerPoint, share it with other groups, and the idea is to branch out with best information possible. And hopefully this will add to your reservoir of information. We also have a lot of free and clickable instantaneous downloads through University of California Ag and Natural Resources. Here's a few of them. So if and when you have time, please read those. And there's references, there's blogs. The California Institute for Water Resources has podcasts. They have interviews with farmers, with planners, with anybody that has anything to do with the use, the legislation, or the domain of water. I have a lot of blogs. If you just Google Janet Harton blogs, you'll get a lot. I have another colleague I've never met. Her name is Janet Harton, and she works on a research area called buffalo chest. So that's not my expertise, but that'll pop up on the search as well. So she and I exchange emails quite a bit because we do get inferences to research that we know nothing about. So feel free to check these out. And I'm just going to kind of kickstart the conversation. Dick already started it talking about the benefits of urban trees. First and foremost, to me, the main benefit of our urban trees is that they cool urban heat islands. All these other benefits are second, third, or fourth. We hear a lot about carbon sequestration. That's the ability, and it's true, trees can actively absorb and store carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in their trunk and roots. The problem is it almost takes a forest to really, in a major and significant way, sequester and green the footprint of what we as humankind have really messed up because of our lack of continuity, if I might say that, when it comes to combustible fossil fuels and lessening that footprint. So speaking mostly about cooling urban heat islands, trees also clean the air, they remove dust, they absorb pollutants. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for plants because they release oxygen. Pure and simple, there's a real need for plants, and if that need doesn't intersect with us, then I don't think there's any bigger need that trees have that they provide for our services. There's a long list of benefits. There's been a lot of research over the last 20 years about how just viewing a picture of a landscape, walking through a gallery, can enhance one's emotional and mental health. Trees also, as we know, provide habitat. They also, as long as we diversify, provide a wide range of structural, different branch shapes, different species of trees, support for all kinds of wildlife. 2 years ago, I earnestly started some research in the temperatures of impervious versus pervious surfaces. Throughout my career, which was spawned in 1984, I've been doing a lot of research on drought-tolerant trees. So the next phase of that, before I retire, was to actually measure the extent of these urban heat islands in the Redlands area and also out in Coachella Valley and along the coast. So we were able to present quite a bit of this information last December in Italy, and with a lot of it coming from the inland and desert areas, it was of high-level interest to colleagues around the world. What are we doing in California? So here's a parking lot in Redlands. On average, late spring and summer, 3 in the afternoon, asphalt parking lots are 145 degrees with no shade. Those same parking lots average about 73 degrees with shade. Other research in the height of summer shows the difference in temperatures on the left, unshaded black asphalt. We have Celsius degrees, but if you can read the face of the infrared thermometer, on the left it's 165 degrees. To the right of that is artificial turf, which virtually, as far as stats, no significant difference. It's hot. 163 degrees. Next to that, concrete that looks darker in that picture than it actually was. It was a fairly light colored concrete. That was 160 degrees. On the right, living grass, 100 degrees. We need living grass in parks and on school grounds. And if we want to save a whopping 9% of the state's water, which is what urban water use amounts to, we would just asphalt over Southern California. But we all know that's not the answer. Turf definitely has its place. Any living system, plant-wise, through transpiration, cools the air very significantly. As far as around our homes, No, we don't want wall-to-wall turf anymore, but I do want to make the distinction about not only the safeness of the playing area, but also the coolness of the area. And there are some very drought-resistant grasses now that we're looking at. This is hard to look at. Pet paws can burn in 1 minute on a 140-degree surface. That's an air temperature of only 90 degrees. I watched my neighbor in the desert carry her 80-pound dog from her car, parked in a parking space in an asphalt parking lot, to the grass-covered dog park. This is what this has come to, and we need to make changes. We need to use the Phoenix model, where no longer is dark asphalt ever applied without it having a coating or being mixed with a lighter color. This was my iPhone on top of artificial synthetic turf. It turned off when I was trying to take the temperature of it. So it really is up to all of us, and I thank you for all you're already doing. Just to be here tonight, going back to your community and really making a difference on these important issues. Also, we have found that higher tree canopies tend to be found in high-wealth neighborhoods. Not always. I'm not saying this is cause and effect, but there's a correlation. A lot of it has to do with the tax base. So if you look at this beautiful neighborhood in Atherton, my sister-in-law lives in Atherton, beautiful neighborhood. The tree canopy cover averages about 48%. We would love to see tree canopy cover across California cities average at least 25%. If you look on the left, the percentile of poverty incidence, very, very low, 2%. If you look at pulmonary, you look at heart disease, extremely low. Pollution, extremely low. Wonderful situation, right? Here's a neighborhood within a mile of here. This is in San Bernardino, about 2 blocks from our former Cooperative Extension office. The percentile of poverty incidence is 99. You can go through the numbers, high incidence of pulmonary and heart disease, tree canopy 0 to 11%. So these are neighborhoods that we're working on with nonprofits and with community groups like yourselves to be able to enhance and increase the number of trees and henceforth the tree canopy that they provide. Again, I want to circle back and say I need to thank, again, Inland Empire RCD, our Master Gardeners, California Climate Action Corps Fellows, so many other groups for helping, in this case in North Redlands, getting some of these trees from our study in the ground. ESRI, University of Redlands, and this is just from last year, but through the diligence and help and funding, we have over 700 trees now in the ground. So thank you all of the volunteers and everybody that's been a part of this. On the left, top trees. Eric Reeves would never let that happen. I was literally giving a talk to a group of arborists for CEUs, and I heard a chainsaw, looked out my window, and this was going on. On the right, poor tree care. You lose your city arborist, nobody's going around and making sure that there's not these girdle trunks that at some point are suffocated and the trees are dying. Here's a really well-pruned tree. I really hit the jackpot on this. I was driving to a talk, and half of the tree had been pruned, and they're ready for the other side. Do you see the difference? Beautiful. West Coast arborists, I don't usually give plugs, but I'm going to give a plug because they were doing a beautiful job. More reading on this, the cost of maintaining versus not maintaining the urban forest. It's well worth it, nickel, dollar, millions of future growth of the economy when it comes to selection and proper long-term care of these trees. So there's another clickable, instantaneously downloadable publication. All right, the bad news is behind me in this talk. Moving forward, we have trees that It's the only research in 40 years I've been with the University of California that literally has circled back to having so much action, and in this case, community involvement in getting these research trees in the ground. So much of our research sits, it doesn't go anywhere. So let me talk about some of our star trees and also thank my partners from UC and our partnering organization, the United States Forest Service, for really collaborating for about 9 years now on this work. What we wanted to do is find out what trees are doing well in warmer climate zones and get those in the ground in cooler climate zones. Sounds pretty easy, right? Not so fast. There's a lot of modeling going on for this, but it's not just the temperature, it's also what trees are hardy enough for, as my bioclimatologist colleague says, Janet, it's weirder weather. That's what climate change is about, weirder weather. So it's not just drought and heat tolerant trees, but it's also trees that can put up with floods and weirder weather. So we had quite a task ahead of us. We, of course, looked at non-invasive species if they weren't native to California. We looked at their drought tolerance. We looked at how well they grow in high pH soils, all these things. And, of course, emerging pest and disease threats. We consulted other experts. We got out of our glass castle and we asked people in the field which of these trees are doing well and which climate zone do you have experience at watching these trees grow. So what we did is to expand and biodiversify, we only selected trees that currently represent less than 1% of the street tree populations in California. Our selected finalists are from around the world. We wanted to start native, but we're down to only a very few native trees that are standing up to what we believe they'll need to in the future. These are our trees in a plot at UC Riverside last year. We turned the water off. Just so happened it was COVID month. It was March 2020. And they are nearly 80% of their expected height at this point on no water at all. So I just wanted to share a few of the species and end with showing you some screenshots of 4 very reputable search engines by which you and those that you share this with can find the right tree for the right place. Netleaf hackberry, it is a California native. I'm going to go through these relatively fast. We have another speaker and I'm going to be very aware of my time here. We also have handouts. One is on find the right tree for your location using these searchable websites. That's the portion of the talk I'm doing now. And there's 10 of these trees that are listed. And then, thanks to Alex Shippey, who I believe is here, he took a very boring looking handout that I had put together and worked his magic, and they're beautiful. And it's called Tree Care Guidelines. We have those in English and Spanish. Thank you, Alex. Another of our star performers is the Maverick Mesquite. This is also a Southwest native tree. It's thornless, which is great. A lot of the other mesquites have thorns. It grows to 35 feet tall. The trees that are going to, at their maturity, reach heights greater than 30 feet aren't friendly under power lines. So these search engines will help you find those that are shorter than 30 feet as needed. This is one of my favorites. Isn't that beautiful? This was developed in Arizona. It's a hybrid between 2 parents. And in the fall, it has this brilliant red foliage. Really, really pretty. It's deciduous. Deciduous isn't bad. If you have it on a certain side of your house that, as leaves drop, can let a lot of sunlight into your house in the winter, it's a really, really good thing. In the summer, then it provides shade for that portion of the house. So that's another one that we really like. This has a rather unfortunate name, Bubba. It's a desert willow, beautiful plant. It grows quickly to about 30 feet. attracts a lot of birds and pollinators, really doing well. And of course, we're going to throw conifer in there. So here's your cypress. Makes a great windbreak. I'm going to launch into these web search databases, but I'm going to share with you that when you're looking at these databases, it's best to not use the USDA climate zones because they're large and broad. So we suggest you use 18 for this area or 19. The plants in 18 and 19 from the Sunset Garden zones are indiscernible. They're going to be the same. So this just shows different zones in Southern California. But again, in this area, we're talking about mostly 18, 19 when you get into other valley cities. So they're just more specific. There's only 9 USDA zones, and we have in California alone 20 sunset zones. All right, so let's get into these search engines. The first is our competitor, Cal Poly. The last is UC. The Cal Poly one is much better. It's much user-friendlier, and we all work together.
You're doing fine on time, but go slow.
So let's look at the first tree that will be pulled up. It's called Select Tree, and the T is shared by Select and Tree. All right? And again, the website is right there.
Could you leave that up so we could get that copy?
They're on the handout.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're all on this handout. And anyone that wants this PowerPoint, feel free to email me, but I'll also have the listserv. And I'll send you, it'll say UC Box, and there'll be a link there. You can just disavow it if it's nothing that you want. We promise we're not selling you anything. So the first one, again, this is the introductory screen you'll see. You can click right and skip to content. You have 2 choices. You can select by common or genus and species name, or you can select for a general list of a plant palette. You can select tree characteristics. So for master gardeners, I say, well, if somebody that's reached out to you to find the right tree for the right place knows a common name, probably not going to know genus species name, then start exactly with that name, but make sure that whatever they're calling the plant as far as the common name is what you have in mind for that same plant with a common name. Look at asparagus fern. There's 2 plants, 3 actually, that are called asparagus fern. What you may be thinking is different than I'm thinking. But all plants have only one genus species name. They don't share those. So in this case, instead of shortening from 100 feet down to 30, if I start out with a general search for climate zones 13, which is out in Coachella Valley, and 18 and 19. All right? Now, this is really important, and the master gardeners use these searches a lot, so they know this. The more criteria and the more you skinny down, the more likely you are to get very minimal results. That makes sense. But when you put in a desert and then 2 valley climate zones, you're going to get a large list of trees, but it doesn't mean those trees that populate the search are recommended for all those zones. It means they're recommended for at least 1. So when you dive in, you'll see, because for each tree, it's going to have a care card. That's what I call them. And on that, it has considerations, and it lists the sunset zone. But that's why this list is going to be larger than if we just searched for zone 18. Okay, so let's see what happens. Any idea? How many trees do you think will pop up? Anybody want to guess? 10, 100, 500,
20.
200? Pretty darn close, because 312, first of all, most of those aren't going to be the right tree for the right place, because not only do we have the sunset zone, but we have, as you well know, microclimates. That means specific environments around your domicile. Do you have power lines? Do you have poor soil? Do you have a narrow area that you don't have room underground to support a London plane tree or a maple tree? So that's when you really mirror what the conditions are at your specific home that's different than the larger climate zone. So here's some examples from that search. You can click on any of those thumbnails. You'll get an 8.5 by 11 high quality printable picture, and you'll get these care cards, as I call them. We'll come back to that. So now I'm going to reduce from 100 feet the maximum height of a tree down to 30 feet. So it's going to be power line friendly. Same climate zones. Very low and low water use. I think we're going to be skinny down, right? Any guess? How many trees that don't attain a height more than 30 feet do you think will grow in the desert or here? 100. I feel like after that lottery of what, $1.9 billion, I mean, we have wonderful trees to give away though, so 172. Okay, we still had some. So here's some examples. The chase tree, fantastic. I'm going to show you more information on that. One from our study popped up. It's the Palo Blanco. It's a nice tree. It's kind of a willow type of foliage. What's important is, do you like it? Not do I like it. So you want to search criteria that includes drought and heat resistance. By your climate zone, inherent in that is heat resistance already. And they do switch, and they have upgraded based on the heat index expectations of the future in these searches. But the use of the plant, whether it's a foundation, whether it's fruit tree, whether it's just for beauty or to attract pollinators, is something that's pretty globally desired. But the aesthetics really appeals to individuals. That's why our volunteers share these websites with those that they help. But then those that they help need to dive in and say, I don't really like the looks of that tree. So here's the care sheets that come with these web searches. So you'll get tree characteristics that will tell you the ultimate height. The next page, it'll tell you site conditions. And if you look at this, it'll tell you the sunset zones 12 to 24. All right, that one happened to hit them all right. It could have just said 18 though, and it would have come up in that search. Under considerations, one of the things that I recommend highly you go to is under the fourth one, where it has insect and disease pests. We want to shy away from sudden oak death. You want to avoid planting some of our beautiful oak trees for a while, taking care of the ones that are out there. We want to avoid invasive shot-hole borer, which attacks perfectly healthy trees. So if you see aphids and whiteflies, big deal. They're going to be gone in this season. So as you learn what are important insects and diseases and what don't matter, then reach out to the master gardeners and they can help you. So here is just 2 climate zones, 18 and 19, very low water use, and we're up to 296 trees. I mentioned the chase tree. It's very versatile. It's a very unpicky tree. It grows in our alkaline soil. It grows in our clay loam soil. It has these purple flowers that are beautiful, and it plays well under power lines. It doesn't get very tall. It only gets about 15, 18 feet tall. And as far as insects and diseases, just about nil. The next search engine is the California Native Plant Society, CalScape. This is a good search engine to start with, but remember that we're talking about not only climate change, but we're talking about urban heat islands and the fact that 95% of Californians now live in our cities and our suburbs. So even with deniers of climate change, I think everybody will agree that, wait a minute, our urban heat islands are hot. We have impervious surfaces. It's really hot. So now I think that, I don't know the percent of residents of Redlands, I think it's pretty high, that would agree that we're in the midst of global climate change and right here in our backyard. But I think everybody would admit that we've got major problems with urban heat islands. So let's go to CalScape. There is an advanced search opportunity on the far right upper corner. I typed in Redlands. It says, enter a California address to see all plants native to that location. And there are, according to this, there's 782 plants. Now these are plants that may or may not be trees. It also has an opportunity to select trees, vines, annuals, whatever kind of plant you're looking for. This means that as far as records can be somewhat reliable regarding, these trees are actually native within the geography of Redlands. That doesn't mean that these trees will still grow here well. So be very careful when people talk about only native plants. Make sure that the plants that they're referring to still can stand up against the harsh climate. Again, just to underscore, I love native plants, it's a great starting point, but we are skinnying down the list of native plants that still thrive. So as long as we're not inviting invasive plants in, if you look at research from here, from University of Texas, from University of Arizona, you'll see some broad palette stretching capabilities if you are open-minded and look beyond the borders of our city. So, here's trees. There's 36 trees native to Redlands. I didn't put anything about their drought tolerance, did I? A lot of these don't have the drought tolerance you would expect. Not all natives are drought tolerant. There I did. We're down to 19. 19 trees, native to Redlands. They take low and very low water requirements. Great starting point. So my suggestion is start with these. Watch out though for what I'm going to show you are susceptibilities to invasive pests and diseases. So now we clipped off to a 30 feet height, right? Now we're down to 12. So let's look at some of those. I didn't select fragrance, flower color, flowering season. I did suggest the height and the top line. That's interesting. It looked fine on my computer. Here's 3 native trees to avoid planting right now. The first one is the coast live oak. Sudden oak death can kill this tree in a season. Take care of the oaks you have, but be wary of right now planting any more coast live oaks. Western sycamore. The problem with it is, as you see, the invasive shothole borer, and the Engelmann oak, the same thing, invasive shothole borer. That's a scary insect because it attacks perfectly healthy trees and native trees. So here's the UC one that of course has a funny name. UC is very fundamentally boring, so it's very real. So what is this? It is water use classification of landscape species, right? Well, should we call it wookles, wuckles? Dr. Dave, as we call it, Dave Frugino, who is the director, calls it WUCLS. Everybody else calls it WUCLS, but it's his website, so I'm going with him. This gets 8 or 10 million hits a year. You know why? Anybody know? Department of Water Resources relies on how it classifies water use. So planners, landscape architects and designers, when you go in to get your plans approved, it needs to be from WUCL's categories or something equally as good. And then water districts and your water purveyors can argue that theirs is as good. So you can click on a city. The downside to WUCL's, one sentence, they lumped 20 sunset climate zones into 6. So I would look at water use here, copy and paste that plant back in the Cal Poly one. You can see all these cities. I can tell you right there, Azusa, Chino Hills, Claremont, Colton, at least half of those are going to be in Sunset Zone 18 or 19, and you're going to get the same result. Plus, you're going to get a bunch of LA Sunset results that otherwise would have been separated in the Cal Poly website. So here's the information. I did narrow the search to very low and low water. Whoops. And we ended up with quite a few plants, a few hundred plants. So you can click on those thumbnails, and then I would go back and look at the Cal Poly website. But I would start with the native plant one first. You've got your handouts. I want to thank you. We have a new 22 trees for tomorrow at gmail.com, a website, and an email address that is a third helpline resource for you. If you go to that QR code that isn't on there, but it's on these sheets. I should have had Alex check my slides. So it's on these. That QR code will take you to the Master Gardener Helpline page. It has the phone number. Betty Richards is here. She might be on the other end of it. It has the MG UC Sanborn at, MG Sanborn at ucanr.edu website. And now we put this one on there for questions specifically regarding trees. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm gonna lose this jacket. Okay, so thank you everyone for showing up. I don't have any fancy slides because I work for the city. They don't allow that in our budget, so that's just me. As Richard kind of gave away, I'm with the city for 21 years. I started out just running brush in the back of a chipper and was fortunate enough to make my way up the ranks. And so I'm over a few other divisions now, not just trees, but I'm also very heavily involved with trees. I'm the city's arborist. I'm track qualified, which is tree risk assessment qualification. I don't directly oversee our little tree crew, but I work with them a lot with their immediate supervisor, and I directly oversee West Coast Arborist, who's our city contractor on all the operations. So yeah, it's a good plug by Janet there. So, and I will say, we met with some homeowners up on Ridge Street today, and I had a chance to let them all know that we have just the most confidence in West Coast Arborists because they've won our contractual bid since I think 2007 every time it goes out, and I have yet to have one, bad dealing with them where they didn't, do something they were supposed to or didn't make something right that they thought they, maybe skirted on a little bit. So very knowledgeable, very good, people, and so I can't say enough about them. Okay, so basically what I'm gonna focus on is kind of what you know, what our protocol is with the city, dealing with trimming, dealing with removals, dealing with plantings, dealing with, you know, specific situations that are kind of more broad and common across the houses here in Redlands and the properties. I did bring some flyers back here that are more or less, they're kind of best management practices that we would recommend if you're hiring your own, you know, trimmer or arborist. And we have a encroachment permit policy that allows you to trim a tree that's within city easement, and it also has kind of some guidelines on that there too, and then it kind of dovetails into some of our municipal code, which can be helpful in certain situations. So, and also there's a stack of my cards back there, because I know after events like this, sometimes you go home and the next day you think of something, and so if you grab a card, you can shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you within like 2 to 3 months. So, just kidding. Okay, so our trim cycle. So again, I've been with the city a little over 20 years, and for about maybe half of that, I've been in some kind of supervisory capacity. So once I get into those roles, I had more involvement with the budget and trimming and blah blah blah, right? So the trim cycle, when I first started, again, kind of climbing the ranks, was 15 to 20 years. The trim cycle is always dependent on how much budget is available for tree trimming. So when I first started, like I said, you know, kind of moving up, if we trimmed your tree today in front of your house, basically per budget, we wouldn't be back there for 15 to 20 years to trim that tree again, right? And that was embarrassing to tell people a lot of times, but at the same time, it just, you know, that's government. We have a certain pot of money, and it goes as far as it goes. And what most people don't usually take into consideration is that we get funding for tree services, not just for tree trimming, right? So that money has to also fund removals, has to fund emergencies, has to fund, you know, stump and root grinding. So now, thanks to all of us, because I'm also a citizen, so I say all of us that voted for Measure T, that's been turned upside down for the good. So our trim cycle, and if you're not familiar with Measure T, it basically was a tax that funds basically the general fund items, which tree trimming is right in the middle of that. So we went from an average budget of at least in the years past, at least $75,000 to about $150,000 on most years, to $1.2 million. So the past 2 years, we've gotten $1.2 million, and it's budgeted for next year already $1.2 million. Now that's funny, because when you tell the public or even our street tree committee members that you got 1.2, and most of them are used to, again, you know, a drop of that, they you immediately think, oh, all the trees in the city will be trimmed. Well, not really the case, right? So we have just under 50,000 trees. So what that ends up working out to is about, that 1.2 gets us, again, once you take out the fact that some of that money has to go towards, you know, removals and plantings and blah, 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 you get about a third of the city trimmed. So we're in the second year of this 1.2 million. I'd say we're about on track. We're probably almost, you know, about halfway done with the city. As many of you guys know, the palm trees in the downtown area, well, or on the south side, these big Washingtonias that hadn't been trimmed for 30 years, and they've got, you know, 8,000 palms on them. Those things soak up a lot of cash the first time they're trimmed. The silver lining is, every time after that they're trimmed, as long as we keep it within a 2-year trim cycle, which those are, it's just a regular, you know, it's like $100 to trim each of them. So the money starts to go further the longer we stay on this big push to catch up. So with that money, with the trim cycle now, we're about down to 5 to 7 years, which is a lot more practical. And I'll kind of circle back. I just mentioned the palm trees, 2 years. There are certain species that, and many of you probably have some of these species in your front yards, that, for lack of a better term, never stop growing, right? They grow like a weed. You trim them one season, and, you know, before the next season, they already are suckering up, and they look like they need to be trimmed again. So we're kind of starting to, over the next 5 years, what I want to do is try to pivot the trim cycle to kind of be more species specific. We've already done it with the palms. If a palm tree is trimmed, if a palm tree is in front of your house and it's trimmed today, it'll be trimmed within 18 months to 24 months, in perpetuity. That's our plan. And it's a little slippery because the more you trim a palm, the more it grows. It's kind of half true, but at the same time, it's way more cost effective. So, the nesting season. They say no good deed goes unpunished, right? So we start trimming all these trees, and in 10 calls, 2 of them were, "Why are you trimming these trees? It's nesting season right now." So nesting season is roughly between February and August. And what I would explain to these homeowners or property owners when they would call is that, sadly enough, we don't have that luxury of not trimming within that window. It just, we wouldn't get much done, and it would, even to our contractor, it would probably be disruptive to their actual, crews and their trim cycles or their trimming. So what we do is, and again, this is another great thing about West Coast Arborists is all of their trimmers are certified trimmers. And just so you know, you can hire any local, tree service contractor. They have to have a tree license. You have to have a D49 or a C27. They don't have to be an arborist. They don't have to be a certified trimmer. West Coast Arborists, all of their trimmers are certified trimmers, and all of their supervisors are certified arborists. So that's the nice thing about them. So they do a nesting check before they trim any tree. So that doesn't mean that every now and then they don't come across a nest once they're trimming it. If they do, they pull off. If there's a nest found in a tree, they pull off. In the past recent years, there's been there's been birds or nests that we find sometimes on the ground, not often, but usually when that happens, it's because a palm skirt fell down and it brings usually owls are usually in there. But large in part, it's a huge success with them doing their nesting checks prior to any kind of trimming. So if a tree is habitat, we leave it alone. On trimming, that's one other thing I wanted to say on that. I'll remember, and I'll have to come back in an unorganized fashion. So we'll move on to removals. So tree removals. So again, we have just under 50,000 trees in our city. A standard percentage of dead to live trees is about 4%. About 4% of your urban forest will be dead trees. So we're a little under that. We have about 2.2 if we do the math. That's almost going to stay that way in perpetuity because there is species in our city that we have a pretty decent amount of that are real susceptible to the sharpshooter. So the sharpshooter is that little bug, and a lot of times you're under a tree, a small tree, and it feels like it's kind of perspiring on you. Half of that is those bugs peeing on you. But the good news is it's pretty much water, right? So, well, those little sharpshooters, they're really deadly to the liquid ambers. Liquid ambers make up our largest portion of dead trees in our inventory right now. The next is crepe myrtles. The bugs aren't so much responsible for the crepe myrtle deaths. That's usually mechanical. It's usually a weed whacker or a lawnmower. They'll hit the bottom of them, and for those of you that are familiar with it, they have a bark that's like paper thin, so it destroys that bark, and the tree gets disease. That's a large the largest portion of our dead trees are those species, and then you have oaks, and you have a lot of the other species that Jen has talked about that are kind of susceptible to others pests, but. We have a small in-house tree crew. We have 4 guys. Those are the guys that are going out putting out fires. Like in the rains we had yesterday, there was a big oak that failed on the corner of Olive and Cajon. It actually took down the street light with it, and that's where our guys will go out and they'll be able to chop it up, push it out of the street, and make it safe for the time being. So those guys also, I have them pretty much geared towards just removals. All the trimming is done by West Coast Arborists, and the really big removals are also done by West Coast Arborists because it's just more cost effective. So plantings and replantings. So we didn't plant for a long time. We didn't have the funding for it, and then there was the drought conditions. Jack Dangerman was a silent partner in planting for us for a few seasons. He would fund our planting list, and but again, during the last probably 5 years, we really pulled off of that and really kind of held off just to see what the drought was really going to do to us. But we're at a spot now where we keep kind of getting enough rain, and we have our own kind of it's basically our own protocol that we've put together, that if you ask for a tree within your city easement, we make sure that you have the space for it. We make sure that there's already in-ground plumbing, and we actually make sure that the area, the width of the parkway will accommodate a tree, because that's been a problem in a lot of areas too. So we have a planting list right now that's going to go out. It's about 120 trees strong. If you would like a tree and you think you have room for it, again, my card's back there, or you can just reach out to the number that's provided on our website for the department. So the department, I probably should have started with that. The department I work for is called it's a big old name, so I'll say it slow. It's Facilities and Community Services Department. It was formerly the Quality of Life Department, and formerly before that, when I first started, it was Public Works. So it's exciting to see what it'll be next. But right now, it's the FCS department. So if you go on the city website, you go to the FCS department, you can call the front office, or you can email, and they can put you on a list. We do plantings in the fall and in the spring. Thankfully, and partially to global warming, that window is a little wider for us. So anyways, if you want a tree, you get on the list. If it's not this list, we'll get you on the next one. But we have the funding now. So spacing for trees, and most people aren't used to this because it's not how it was, and it's evident all over the town. We have a 40-foot spacing. So the requirement's 40-foot spacing, and that's so you don't have these trees trying to grow off from under other trees, right? Because all that does is make for a poor structure, and then pretty soon one of those trees, usually the smaller one, or the one that's younger, is going to lose, it's going to fail, it's going to end up in the street or on your neighbor's car. So if you have that 40-foot, parallel to the road, we'll also make sure that the spacing might not be 40 feet, that you have adequate spacing across the sidewalk too, because if you've got a humongous oak tree in your front yard, and you want to, it's only 10 feet away from where you used to have another tree, we're probably not going to plant a tree there, because again, that smaller one's going to compete for everything it needs from the bigger one. But that doesn't mean that you might not have room, down the way a little more, still within the front of your property. So like I said, reach out if you'd like a tree. I'll actually go out there, measure it out, and then we'll close the loop with you on if you can have a tree, and based off of power lines and a couple other factors, I'll usually give you a list of 3 trees you can choose from that will try to get you on the street. So back in the day, we would just say, okay, yeah, go plant whatever. And then we'd get a lot of homeowners that were upset because they wanted a flowering tree, or they wanted a shade tree, and they didn't get that. So if you reach out to us, we'll try our best to kind of get you get you a list of something that would kind of be more to your liking. And let's see here. Palm trees and crepe myrtle plantings. So we don't have a moratorium on those 2 species, but those 2 species are the most abundant species in our little city. So what the Street Tree Committee has asked, and we're obliging, is that those 2 species be very selective on where we plant them. So if you want a crepe myrtle, chances are, if you're not in a historical area, or if you didn't have a crepe myrtle lined street and that's what was removed, you're probably not going to get a crepe myrtle. Palm trees, same thing. We have just an exorbitant amount of palm trees, and most of you probably know they don't really have any real benefit to the environment. They are California, but in most areas, unless you have, again, a historic area or an iconic area that's lined with palms, you're probably not going to get a palm tree replacement. But like I said, there's not a moratorium. There is, you can always ask, we can always talk about it, but those 2 species, just so everyone knows, those aren't a real likely species to be replanted. Irrigation. So I was talking with Richard, and he mentioned that one of the past meetings was kind of geared towards going more like drought tolerant with landscaping. So in relation to the tree in your parkway area or your easement in front of your house, what we noticed is when the drought started ramping up, the last 5 years, that caught on. It's caught on a lot, right? People pull the turf out, they put decomposed granite in there and some succulents, and a lot of times they would not really thinking about it. They pull the irrigation up to the tree, and the tree starts dying, and then they call us and they're wondering why, and they want the tree out. And then in better cases, they would leave irrigation to the tree, but they wouldn't really think about the fact that that tree, in most cases, that tree was used to, having sprinkler water on it, which is much more than, drip irrigation is going to give it. Not to mention, and again, I'll kind of, refer back to Janet's slideshow she had with the measuring of different surfaces. When you take out, turf and you put in decomposed granite, that heat reflectivity is major, and a lot of times that alone, would kill a tree. Now you take that and you couple it with the fact that a lot of areas of our city are so old, and the trees are 80, 100 years old, so these big oaks, they're like human beings, right? They're not going to recover very well from that change in environment. So that's not to say you shouldn't do it, but what we recommend is kind of amortizing that over maybe 3 years or 3 seasons. So you don't just take it from, 100% of what it was getting in water and we'll call it environment to, 20%. Maybe you go, maybe you just turn the water back the first year. Then maybe next year, maybe then you start actually, retrofitting the turf with something you like. And now it's kind of, again, it's kind of getting used to that over a few seasons. I kind of touched on it. That's another thing that's nice to put out there is there's certain areas of the city that you have these big iconic trees, like the oaks on Buena Vista and Alvarado. And in the past, probably 3 years, we've had a lot of those big ones just totally fail or fall apart. And so, we've started going through and kind of doing more of a crown reduction on some of these big ones, because oak trees in that area, we're specifically in that area, they're pushing 150 years old. They're probably about 120 years old. Well, they're not I think a lot of people think that an old tree is a sequoia. It's going to live 3,000 years. It's not the case. It's going to take itself apart little by little. So what we do is we'll go in and try to do more of a little more of an aggressive trimming on it that's still, functional and healthy for the tree, but it basically helps that tree to, get a little closer to the ground, get a little smaller, kind of what they try to do on their own. It's called retrenchment, so that we can keep it around for, maybe 20, 30 more years. But having said that, if you have a tree that falls apart in the front yard and we have to take the whole thing out, try to understand, and I can always talk to anyone about it, but also, I just want to mention that those trees a lot of times have pretty much surpassed the point of healthy living, and it was evident a couple years ago in the North 40 or the quad area of the university. Some of you might have seen they took some really big, old sturdy oaks out because they were falling apart. You go by and they had like boards propping up trying to keep certain limbs up, and it's just, that tree is beyond its years. So it's sad, but the nice thing is we can always replant with another species that might not be the same thing, but maybe close enough, and give it, another start. So anyways, that's about the end of my run. And like I said, I really don't have any slides, so I'm sorry. I want to do a little Q&A. I don't know if we have time for Q&A.
Oh, yeah, that's what I want to
okay,
do right now.
yeah, so who was putting it on, but it was going over this, it was a local university that's testing out these types of grasses that are really, really, really low water usage, but yet stay green all year round. So, I hope that's direction that we start moving in general, because I always say I can't speak to trees in Yucaipa or in San Bernardino, but in this little city, I've done it my whole career, and trees that grow up in grassy, sprinkler irrigated areas, that's what they use, that's what they're like, So if you can take it back to like Janet's saying, a ground cover that's still green, mulch is fine too. I'm really not a fan of any of the DG or anything that's again going to absorb heat and then hold it and reflect it on that tree trunk. Another good thing that Janet mentioned is if you can split the zones to where you have, you know, some basically like some tree bubblers on the tree, and then drip irrigation on your ground cover, that's like the best case scenario, because you can kind of control those independently of each other through the different seasons. So, yes, sir.
Hey, I was recently reading an article by, regarding the importance of using California native plants because in an area the pollinators and the things which are being pollinated co-evolve together that kind of fit together like lock and key in their adaptations. And so you may have a imported plant that may grow beautifully, and you may see hummingbirds feeding from it or whatever, but the insects may not be able to, for example, reproduce on it and this kind of thing that are needed as pollination. And so I'm wondering how I put that together with importing some plants like
This is your round.
I was just giving actually a 3-hour talk today to a group of landscapers in San Luis Obispo, and this became a heated discussion, and you're very nice the way you stated it. Some people tell me only natives, but some of the insects that used to be natives are dead too. So your premise is right, start with natives, but when I was a student at University of Minnesota, I'll never forget how barren the Minneapolis campus was. Not from lack of students, but from lack of American elm trees, because it was a monoculture and they'd all been wiped out by Dutch elm disease. So it really does take a biodiversity, making sure that the natives are nurtured first and foremost, but we're running into, unfortunately, a red light if we don't broaden the diversity of our landscapes. So your point is a very serious one, and it's really well taken. Fortunately, our entomology department, UCR, has found that over time there has been evolution, and so you are getting a lot of these native biodiverse insect species now feeding and providing habitat for their young on some introduced species. So it's not the full answer, but I hope that that's a partial solution. I do hear you.
Can I use the Master Gardener helpline? I have a catalpa tree that was fine forever, and suddenly now, I don't know what went wrong. It could be water table, it could be the bark looks funny. Is that my best place to turn to see if there's anything I can do to save this tree?
Yeah, you'll probably reach Betty, and she's in the room now. But Betty, and I won't put her on the spot, but it's great if you email in a picture, that really helps too, because what I'm going to say right now is what Betty's going to say is chat, look at pictures, and then she can also share with you a lot of the websites that show pictures of what she might think it is.
And that's the 22 trees for tomorrow?
If you go on the QR, you see that QR code?
Yeah.
Yes, you can go on the QR code and get the phone number and the other helpline, or you can go directly to that one, yes. One other real quick thing that Eric, he reminded me of something I wanted to say, that when turf is removed, then it's so important that these trees be slowly weaned off that water, because trees, as you know, prefer infrequent, really deep watering as they age and mature. And so the turf, although it doesn't prefer everyday watering, a lot of people do that, don't they? So you have to make sure that when turf is removed, even if it's just dragging a hose out and gradually starting to get those roots drawn down and deep watering it, otherwise you get 40-mile gust of wind and those trees that otherwise were going to make it fall right over because they don't have the anchorage. So that's what I was thinking when you were talking about taking out the turf. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Well, we have a street that started with liquid ambers and now they're all gone.
I know
And
about
they
that.
have been replaced with the crepe myrtles. We haven't replaced anything because we're still trying to decide what to do, but you're saying crepe myrtles are not really your favorite thing to put in. Can we be different, and
It's a one-block
yeah,
cul-de-sac.
it's a one-block cul-de-sac. What kind of trees do you really recommend, if not the crepe myrtle?
So, and just to clear it up, I love the crepe myrtle.
I do
So,
too.
yeah, it's a
I
do too,
super
when
functional
there's a dark
street
red.
tree, you know, but I understand when they, you know, we got inventories back and they said, well, we got 7,000 other species are all crepe myrtle. So, there's a bunch of other species now that, have the same, you know, characteristics of the crepe myrtle, you know, with the physical size, the flowering, the, you know, deciduous nature of them. So again, if you reach out to me, I can give you 10 species if you'd like to look at. And along with the stuff that Janet provided, I'm gonna grab one of those flyers too, because it's a neat time for species of trees, because there's so much research gone into trees that still flower and are low water usage and are, you know, resistant to certain pests and stuff. So I mean, if you just, you know, get a hold of me, we can figure something out. You know, what's the name of the street?
Arrowview,
Arrowview. Okay. Yeah.
one block on one side of Fern, one block on the other side.
Yeah,
of Fern.
yeah, you're
We're
right
on
there
the
by
outside.
Lakeside and all that.
Outside.
Same
Yeah,
thing.
block
Yep.
away.
Yeah. Yeah, the sad thing about the liquid ambers is they're all, if it's not dead this year, sadly enough, it's gonna succumb probably in the next, you know, 3, 4, 5 years. So we need to figure out species, and we have been figuring out species to replace those. And we have we like to go small species, big species, small species, big species, you know, so that pattern. And that's not a requirement, we like to. So again, there's, you know, a dozen species we can give you to choose from that you could go research and look at yourself, or, you know, even I could give you other areas of cities that species in a mature state, you know, is, you can look at it. But yeah, reach out to me.
I will do that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you know it, on the parking lot side of S3 that faces Tennessee, they planted a whole row of trees that are about the size of crepe myrtles, and they flowered. I think they're lovely. Do you know what they are?
On Tennessee?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're chitalpa.
What?
Yeah, chitalpa. So there's catalpa that she had over there with the big old
I
beautiful
never heard
leaf.
of
Yeah, chitalpas are, they're nice. They're a pretty tree. The only reason we don't use them more is because their canopies are so full at a small age that it'll make it difficult for people pulling in and out of the driveways. In fact, we worked with Esri to plant the block, the same, on Tennessee, same street, but between Redlands Boulevard and Colton, they actually cut 4x4 boxes into the sidewalk, like by Carl's Jr. and the Papa John's and stuff. And we let them put, because Jack is Jack, so we let him move on. We let him put the talpas in there. The one nice thing about what Jack plants, I will say, is he takes care of them most times. So we don't, you know, give him.
I figured he would know what he's doing.
Yeah.
So if I copy him, I
Yeah.
can't be going to.
No, they're a nice tree. They're a functional tree, and you know, again, overall they don't get really big. If you want to see some mature ones, drive by the animal shelter, because in the front, on the corner of Kansas and Park Avenue,
Okay.
there's 2 big mature ones. So
Would that work under power lines for me?
yeah, it will. Yeah, because the ultimate height is probably about 25, 30 feet. So there'll be a little bit of, you know, line clearance in that, but it definitely won't be anything that damage the structure of the tree or integrity. Yeah.
I'm afraid we're going to have to cut off the questions because we need to leave this place by 7:30 or so. But let's give a hand for our speakers. And again, please pick up their handouts. They're over here on the table as you leave. I do want to promote here. We're going to have what we call a drill down, which is an actual demonstration of how to plant a tree. We're going to do it first on a Zoom meeting, and there's a sign up over here to show you that. And then we're going to do it on an actual tree planting. And Eric has agreed that in the sports park over in North Redlands, that's where we'll be planting some trees.